Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Hello, this is Alex here. I'm just making a little pre-announcement before we do this episode. This one's a little bit different to the way we usually run it. Instead of having it with the whole group or a few of us, this is actually just me talking to horror writer Kealan Patrick Burke, who is actually hilarious and super lovely, as you're going to see as well. I'd just like to apologize in advance. The mic quality that I am displaying here is god-awful and just terribly echoey. That's down to me pulling the old rookie mistake of forgetting to change to the right mic, so apologies for that, but otherwise enjoy this fascinating interview with a very talented man.
All right, we've got Kealan Patrick Burke here, esteemed horror author and winner of the Bram Stoker Award, which, if anyone doesn't know, is basically the Oscars of horror novels. So that's pretty amazing, and definitely want to talk about that. I realized, Kealan, when I first messaged you, well, not first because I actually did before, but I called you Patrick. Is that something that happens very often? People like refer to you by your middle name, or?
Yeah, but I don't mind that. I mean, when you have three names, it's about two too many. So whatever people call me is fine. I mean, I have been called everything under the sun. So Patrick is the least offensive of them. I can work with that.
That's fair. I mean, they're all very Irish names as well. So it's like,
yeah.
But hey, whatever. I guess as long as you're identifiable, that's sort of nice.
Exactly.
So yeah, look, I thought I'd address the elephant in the room first, and Turtle Boy, which I read just before. I listened to it on audiobook. It's actually free on Audible, I believe, if you've got a subscription.
Yeah.
Won the Bram Stoker, which is amazing. So how did that come about? How does one even get in the running for that?
Honestly, I didn't know when I wrote that. I had just joined the Horror Writers Association, and I didn't know what the process was either. But having not been a member for years now, it does appear to me, and I could be wrong, and I'm not saying it to be controversial, I don't know. But it does seem that you are in a better position to get that book in front of the membership if you're a member yourself.
Sure.
Because I remember at the time when the Turtle Boy was released, a bunch of people recommended it to the HWA, whatever the recommendations list. And from that, then you try to get everyone possible to read the book in the hopes that they'll vote for it. But I mean, the field is huge every year, so it's never a guarantee.
Yeah.
And honestly, yeah, exactly. And I was up against Stephen King's Lacey's story, the novelette version.
That's a great book.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's actually one that I had difficulty getting through for the longest time. And then when I sat down and barreled my way through it, and it ended up being one of my favorites of his. Very underrated, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just a tangent a little bit. It's one of those that, as I was reading it, sometimes I was thinking, well, maybe this is going on a bit. But I think of all his stories, it might have stayed with me the most, just because there is so much to it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a great book. If you haven't read it, go out and read Lisa's story for sure.
Well, I think that started out life as a novelette or a novella in a magazine first.
Okay.
That's what the Turtle Boy was up against, that and three or four other books. So I didn't bother going to the ceremony, and I didn't bother even checking the results. I said, I'm up against King. Why bother?
Sure. Yeah.
But then I got notified back in, and this will tell you how long ago it was, in AOL Instant Messenger.
Wow.
After I dialed it up. Yeah, I think it was Lee Thomas, actually, the author, who just messaged me and said congratulations. And he'll tell you, to this day, I said, for what? And he went, what? For winning the award. And I didn't know what to do with myself, because this was back in 2004, 2005, maybe.
Yeah, right.
And literally my feet were still wet, and I had no idea what I was doing. But I think what it was about the Turtle Boy was long before nostalgia became as popular as it is now.
Yeah.
I kind of just wrote about a childhood American summer and people
Mm.
responded to it. So it's just, I think for me, a case of right place, right time. If I did it now, the market is so oversaturated with that stuff, people probably wouldn't even blink at it, you know?
That's true. That's true. I mean, after Stranger Things came out, I think there was just this like, and of course, you know, I'm sure Stephen King's name will come up multiple times in this conversation, but of course, he was the original peddler of that brand. I mean, you could argue that he created it, but that's just got such a sway through the cultural, you know, mindset right now that it's just, you know, it's coming from everywhere. But yeah, I can see how that would have fit in like a dip of that where people are like, oh, it's just like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing though. And it's got such a twisty story too, you know, like I don't necessarily want to do any spoilers, but like there's the thing at the end where you're like, oh, okay, something with the dad, and then the bit right at the end where you're like, oh, okay, this is a whole different thing. This could be a thing going forward.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, I think that, you know, just like how retro is the thing now, twists have, I think, kind of become an imperative for some writers, particularly in the horror genre, where you'll see reviews of books that just, well, it just told a story and it didn't get twisty at the end, which is what I want. So yeah, I wanted, and I grew up watching the original Twilight Zone and everything, so that twist in the tail thing has always appealed to me. But I think that the Turtle Boy was kind of an amalgam of all my inspirations to that point. King, obviously, Rod Serling, Ray Bradbury, and yeah, I think it was just one of those books that hit at the right time. I think I was lucky.
Yeah, that is awesome. I mean, it's just such an amazing thing to have snagged that and been in that place, you know. So, I mean, look you're reasonably popular on TikTok, which I think I saw happen at some point because I remember seeing you when you were at about maybe 6,000 or something, and then you started doing the Irish stuff, and it just like went up to like 20K. What's the story there, you reckon?
It was a video, and I mean, I wasn't chasing virality or anything. I was actually just having fun making stupid videos. And I mean, I think that's really the point of TikTok, you know. And I think writing is about the only thing I take seriously. Anything else that's kind of tangential to that is just, I mean, if you have to promote yourself, be a little bit of an idiot about it, you know, and have fun. Or what's the point? Because you'll exhaust yourself.
Totally.
Yeah. So I just did a video, I think, how to curse politely in Irish, how the Irish curse politely or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that blew up. I remember putting my phone down after uploading it, and I went off, and I can't even remember what I did. I think I made dinner, and then I come back, and my phone was hopping on the counter. I was like, "What is this?" And I couldn't believe it was that popular. And of course, in typical fashion, nothing has been as popular since. You know, they get you hooked.
Yeah, of course. Your videos still crack, you know, like a couple thousand views every time, which is more than I can say about mine. And you know, more credit to you there. Do you think there's been much of a actually, sorry, step back. You predominantly go through small trade publishing houses, is that right? You're not technically self-published, but you've done some stuff at Graveyard Dance and Cemetery Dance.
Cemetery Dance, yeah, I do. Yeah, I've worked with a lot of the small press publishers, or like Cemetery Dance, Subterranean. Yeah, they back in the day, that was where it was at. You know, there was. But I always send stuff off to New York. I always tried the traditional publishers, and then for about 10 years, I just kind of, once the ebook explosion happened, I had about probably 15, 16 books already out at that point. So I decided to re-release them myself. And that proved to be a wise business decision because I've been able to do it full time since.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm not one of these people who says I will forever self-publish or I will not self-publish. I don't really care where the books end up as long as people get to read them.
Yeah, you know? You're not a purist either way. You don't.
No. And I mean, my latest book I've been working on for 7 years. I'll finish it this year, and it's already been to my agent, and she got back to me and has some notes for me that make it even better, which is what you want. And once that's done, then she's going to see if she can sell it in New York. And in the meantime, I'll keep releasing shorter stuff, novellas and what have you, on myself, you know. So I don't really have thoughts on it. I know I've seen a lot of people who just absolutely refuse to go the traditional route because it's pure
Yeah.
evil.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's something to be said for the frustration involved in that, the long waits, everything. But there's an equal amount of problems with, I think, self-publishing as well, particularly when people just want to do it for the immediate validation. And
Yeah.
so they can skip right over the whole gauntlet and go, look, I'm published.
Yeah. Totally.
You know, so I mean, it's a bit of one or the other. I mean, if your work is good, it doesn't really matter where your work ends up as long as people can find it.
That's a really good attitude to have that I haven't actually looked, because most of, as I'm sure you're aware as an author, most of this stuff seems to be fairly split one way or the other, and there's plenty of hybrids and things out there. But
Yeah,
most people do tend to be like, oh no, I pretty much just go. But there's definitely something to be said for both, because both markets have their own appeal. Obviously, there's the literary cachet of going for a more traditional self-publish, and then there's the flexibility and the little guy ability to sort of duck and weave with the self-published stuff. Do you have a I'm trying to think of how to formulate this. Do you have sort of like a, not a formula, but a way that you've been releasing things over the last couple of years that sort of combines two? I mean, is it sort of like you'll release 3 novellas or something and then a novel, or it's just sort of however it comes?
no schedule whatsoever. I basically will sit down and write the idea. If it wants to be a short story, it will. If it wants to be a novella, it will. If it wants to be a novel, it will. I don't know. Sometimes I know based on the scale of the idea that it's going to be on the longer side.
Hmm.
If it's a novel, I'll send it off to New York. If it's shorter than that, I will release it myself.
Okay.
So I don't really set out with any of these in mind. I just write and see what happens, and whatever comes as a result, then I decide where it goes.
Yeah, that's cool. It's almost like the best of both worlds, isn't it? Because you can, obviously, like I said, you can release novellas and stuff. I mean, this is the situation I find myself in. I've released a series of short stories that I was just like, look, I just need to get something out there so that I can,
Yeah.
just a notch that I can be like, look, I did it. I put out a book, and I think all authors have that. And I didn't think I was good enough necessarily to go straight for the traditionally published route. So I was like, look, I'll just put something out and put it on, essentially just put it up on TikTok and maybe do some ads and things for it. And I did that, and I've got it out, and I've got a book now, and a writers collective, Precipice Fiction, actually the ones who this podcast is sort of sponsored by, I guess you'd say, or created by. And we put out a book as well, another set of short stories. And now I'm sort of writing a novella, which I would love to do the same thing with. But then there's the bigger book that I'm like, I wouldn't want to just throw that out and have it fall on deaf ears. So in that route, it might be more prudent to go, well, look, I'll put this aside to go to the trad market. So I really like that idea of like, look, you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket. You can mix and match. I think that's really, really fascinating.
Well, yeah, because what you can do as well is if you write a novel, you can set a time limit and say that when this is done, I'll send it to an agent or I'll send it to a publisher and I'll give it a year and I'll go away and I'll work on other stuff. If after a year there's been no noise from New York, I'll publish it myself.
Oh, I love that. I love that. See, that's exactly what I was looking for.
When the main thing is that when you send something out, don't sit there obsessing and waiting for it. You move on and have a body of work, because if that book sells and they come back to you and go, great, what else have you got? You've got nothing because you were sitting there waiting for it to sell.
You're just sitting there with your fingers crossed, and like, please.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, I would definitely not advise anybody to burn any bridges. I would say keep as many options as possible open.
Yeah.
Because even if you've been self-publishing for 10 years and you're making a good living at it, if New York comes calling someday and says, hey, listen, this book you wrote has gotten great notices, we'd like to publish it, the last thing you want is to have TikToks out there where you're bad-mouthing trad publishing because it didn't suit you at the time.
Yeah, and there are plenty of those out there too.
Oh, I know, I see them, and I'm like, oh God, it's cool if you want to self-publish for the rest of your life, but if the bottom collapses out of self-publishing, where are you going to go then?
True. And it's just, it's such a saturated market already. At least if you go that trad publishing route, then you can at least, there's a you can push through the noise at least, because trad publishers have got the marketing budget and stuff to make sure that you get at least a little bit seen. Awesome. Okay, let's talk about my favorite work of yours that I have read. And I haven't read, honestly, I think I read The Portrait, which I was asking you about before. I also went through Turtle Boy, obviously, but the way I found you was through Sour Candy, which is, I'm probably going to say my favorite, or close to my favorite horror novella I've ever read. Like, it's just so chilling. That's just such a terrifying story. And I don't know what it is about it. So I want to talk about the inception of that, and also how that sort of took off on TikTok, because I see it everywhere on TikTok all the time. So I don't know, where did that come from?
That one's a crazy one. I haven't had an experience like that since. What happened was the first 10 pages or so actually happened. I went to the grocery store for candy for me and my girlfriend. Okay. And there was a kid screaming there.
Yeah, right.
And I'm used to kids screaming in grocery stores. Everybody is. But this kid, the decibels going on actually hurt my ears.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, this, Jesus, and I look, and his mother looks like a zombie just looking at the candy. She's just gone. And I felt really bad then. I thought, oh, man, this mother has lost her mind because of this kid. And I felt bad for being judgmental about it. And as I'm walking out of the store afterwards, I thought, geez, I shouldn't have been that person that, oh, shut your fucking kid up. I didn't say anything to her, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And then I thought, what would serve me right is if I got home and that kid was waiting for me and he went, hi, Daddy, and suddenly started changing my reality to fit him into it. And that creeped me the hell out. But it took me about a year for that to kind of connect in a way where I felt like I was ready to write it. And I wrote it over the course of about a week. Designed the cover for it, put it on Amazon.
I love that cover. I love that cover.
Yeah, and I posted about it on Twitter, and it immediately got the attention of Blumhouse. And they asked to read it, and I sent it to them. And then for about 3 years, we were trying to get it made as a movie, and all sorts of big name directors were attached, scripts were written, but ultimately it never came to anything. But it has, since I wrote it, continued to be the book that sells the most for me, which is insane, because I think that was 2017, maybe.
And it's a novella, so it's only a little book. Like, it's what, like
a novella, yeah.
Like 15,000 words?
Yeah, but I think it was like 21. But I think that people kind of underestimate the power of a good novella. Because, I'm looking at my bookshelves over here, and there's books that are that big.
Yeah.
And I'd love to read them, but I know that it'll take me half the year. I pick up a novella from Tim Levin, say, over there, and I can read it in one sitting. And I get the whole start, middle, and end, just enough fleshing out of characters, just enough plot development, just enough action to suit me. It's not intimidating. It's a good lunchtime read. It's a good, I'm not in the mood for an epic tome, but I'll just knock out a few novellas. And I think there's an awful lot of power that can be distilled into something that short. I
tend to agree. I think personally for horror, I think it might be the perfect form, because it's just like, if we're talking in the 20 to 30,000 word range, like, I know my favorite, of course, it's funny, we've actually got a counter on here for how many times someone brings up Stephen King, and it's always me, because I'm just such a huge Stephen King fan. But like some of his stories, like just The Mist or Hellbound Heart as a novella. You could even argue Heart of Darkness. It's like, there's just something about that form that lends itself just to ratchet up the tension just to the point where you're like, even look, if you wanted to be like really sacrilegious about it, you could even argue that the epistolary section of Dracula is kind of a novella, and that's by far my favorite part of that book. There's just something about that form that is just so like, you get it all, it's just enough to keep you going, and you get enough characters and things.
Well, and it's funny how many readers particularly turn their noses up at the idea of novellas when half of their favorite books are novellas. They're spaced to make it look on the bookshelf like it's like that. The
Yeah.
Turn of the Screw. Henry James called the novella the beautiful and blessed novelle, and The Turn of the Screw is a novella. Half the classics, The Picture of Dorian Gray, they're all
Yep.
like they're packaged like novels, but with spaces that big between the sentences, you
All
know.
the pages at the beginning and the end. Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. So, and like you were saying, Stephen King, some of his best work is novella length. The
Oh,
Shawshank Redemption, you know,
yeah.
all the Apt Pupil, all the stuff in different seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
I can
great one.
write. I would argue sometimes he's at his best when he keeps it shorter.
I think so. I think so personally. Like, I mean, look, The Stand is a great novel, and
Yeah.
like I said, Lacey's Story is really good as well. So he definitely can write that longer form. But
Oh
like,
yeah,
there's just something about that really condensed form that I think brings out the best in him. Like,
yeah.
I don't know what
Razor sharp.
I think that might be, yeah, I think that might be related to the form as well, just the genre, just in terms
Yeah.
of. I mean, how many novellas have you written in your career?
Wow. Probably about 12, I'd say.
Yeah, wow.
Possibly more, I think.
That is
Yeah, but
not easy.
I'm a big fan of them. And what I've noticed over the past couple of years is how much more film interest there has been in my shorter stuff than the longer.
I can see how that would be because when you think of like there's that old cliche that like the movie wasn't as good as the book, and I think that's because you can't get as much of the book into a movie. Whereas with a novella, you can get most of it, and a picture tells a
Yeah,
thousand
or
words.
and it gives you an opportunity to expand it for the film too, but you
Totally.
can put your own signature on it.
Mm.
But yeah, it's I'm a huge fan of novellas. I always have been. And when I see these people talk online about, I won't read those. I don't like novellas. I'm like, how could you not like them? It's still a story. Why
Yeah.
does length have anything to do with it? You know?
I think there's that sense of endurance that a novel brings out in you as well. It's like, oh, I'm gonna get to the end of it. I'm gonna get to the end of Freedom by Jonathan Franzen. Like, I'm gonna read Bleak House. I'm just gonna go through the whole thing, and like there's this sort of machismo to it, I guess. Or is it that?
Maybe, yeah. But I mean, I enjoy them all equally. But I don't badmouth books based on their length. And
Seems it's arbitrary.
yeah, I love short stories. I love 10,000 page novels. I like 50-page novellas. It doesn't matter to me. Only the story matters.
As long as it's a good story, as long as it's got a good beginning, middle, and end, good, well fleshed out characters. I'm a sucker for place personally. Like
Yeah.
all my ideas start from a place. Do you find that? I know you're in Ohio now, and obviously the Turtle Boy is set around that. I don't know if it's specifically in Ohio, but it's set
Yeah.
around that sort of area. Do you find place to be a big inspiration in terms of what you do, or do you come from the characters first?
I mean, it varies, but I love to write about places I know, and I've traveled all the way across this country, and I've seen every state. And we'll say the last time I was down in Tennessee, all the kudzu vine had grown over everything, and it looked like figures had been covered instead of just trees. All these shapes across the landscape, and that creeped me the hell out.
Yeah, right.
So things like that. I mean, my brain immediately started getting working. Excuse me, but yeah. So sense of place is definitely vital for me. But whether or not that's the origin of the story or just a factor of the story, it really depends. But yeah, I've definitely been places where I've left there going, okay, I got to set something there because that was incredible.
Yeah, cool. I remember there was one I was doing that was sort of like it almost wound up being sort of like an urban fantasy sort of thing, and someone told me it was actually very similar to Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, which I've actually never read, but it started from this like a gas station in Arizona, which I've been to obviously, but like I just saw there's a few things that I've done that have been set in the desert, but just something about red earth and like just this barren planet, like just the gas station thing is, I don't know, it's just an interesting jumping off point, or at least somewhere to give you some ambiance about it.
Well, the thing about a desert setting too is it's like a blank page in itself, and
Yes.
you're very much focused on the characters in this bland expanse, So you're zeroed in on the kinds of people who would choose to live there and what they get up to when they are.
Mm, yeah, definitely.
I love that. I love that myself. I love seeing stuff that's set in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's because it's just like, have you ever seen The Witch? I forget the director's name, but the one he
Yeah.
also did Lighthouse. Like
Yep.
that's just all about that. That place is its own character. That whole
I love
farm
that. Yeah.
zone. It's
Yeah.
just so spooky and barren and like, oh, we're all gonna die. It's
Robert
just.
Eggers. Yeah. I think he's doing Nosferatu next. I'm excited to see that.
Oh, really? Oh, that'll be
Mhm.
great. Yeah. Did you see The Lighthouse as well? Or
I did, yeah. I've seen everything he's put out so far, but big fan.
Yeah.
I love the atmosphere of his films.
Yeah, it's almost tangible, isn't it? Like you could
Yeah.
cut it with a knife, as it were. It's just so oppressive. It's actually this particular Lighthouse is quite funny as well in like little snippets, but it is just so like you feel every beat.
It is. It's like a kind of an absurdist horror movie. There was a lot of
Yeah,
things to be amused by while being horrified at the same time.
yeah, that's the game, isn't it? Like
Hmm.
funny scary is a really interesting pairing, but it can
Tough
work.
to pull off. It's tough to
It
pull it
is.
off.
Because of the tension. Like if as soon as you make someone laugh, you cut that tension. So it's hard to. But yeah. If you can do it, it's good work if you can get it.
Well, if and the thing about it is that if you have to make the comedy funny and the horror horrific, because if you
Yeah,
fail on one of those, you're failing entirely. You know.
yeah, yeah. There's not a lot of space for error. That's for sure.
Jeff Strand, he's actually fantastic at that. He's a novelist,
Jeff
but
Strand, was it?
Jeff Strand, yeah, he writes
Right.
comedy horrors. They're really good.
Actually, this is something I meant to bring up. Like you on TikTok, you're incredibly funny, but we don't get a lot of that humor necessarily in many of the works that I've read. Do you think it's just that you just like double down on the horror and just go, this is my lane and that's kind of what I'm going to do in this idiom?
I mean, there's a vein of humor in some of the stuff that I've written, but not the kind of idiotic humor that I have on TikTok.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it's a different kind.
a lot of it is, making fun of myself and Ireland and the absurdity of the division. You're from Ireland, people tend to have an idea of what that means, and they're usually wrong. It's
Yeah.
just like being from Australia, it's like being from anywhere else. But it's glorified. So I think my videos are basically just pissing all over that,
Yeah.
because it's stupid. But yeah, when it comes to horror, then horror is like me going in and putting on my suit and tie and sitting down, and my job is to fuck you up.
Yeah, of course. Of course. And
When I leave that alone, like you say, when it comes to comedy horror, the comedy breaks the tension. When I walk away from writing something deeply dark and depressing and grim and horrifying and shit, then I get on TikTok and I want to have a laugh.
yeah,
Yeah,
fair enough. It's like a bifurcation of your personality. You get a
exactly.
bit of this that way, and then you want to just mix it up on the other one. I was going to say your brand of horror in some of them, particularly the portrait, and I would argue as well sour candy. It reminded me a lot of Nick Cutter. Have you read any of his stuff like The Deep?
Yeah, I read The Troop. I haven't read any of the ones since then.
I haven't
The
read The
Troop.
Truth, but I've heard good things. What's that?
It's it's fucking bleh. It's
Yeah,
good. It's good. It's really good. But oh my God, I was activated the gag reflex a couple of times.
yeah, I've heard it's pretty intense. I really like The Deep. Actually, it's kind of a like an eldritch horror thing. Like as, but it
Yeah, I
takes.
have it. I have it here. I have it here somewhere. I haven't read it yet though.
No, I recommend it. I've made my way through it in like 2 days on an ebook. It's great. I do want to read The
Yeah,
Truth though. That's yes, I've
you
heard.
should. I think you'll like it. Yeah, it's good.
Is it like a like only read it once sort of thing or?
Yeah, yeah. I won't be revisiting. Well, I don't reread books anyway, but
Yeah.
there's
Me
too
neither.
many of them.
There are. Yeah, I've got a friend. Oh, look, I do have a few comfort reads, but like I have a friend, Paddy. Actually, his name is. He's of Irish descent. And he's like, I don't understand you guys. Like, I can't reread a book. There's too many of them. I like he went through Moby Dick and he's like, okay, I did it, but that's it. I'm not going back to Moby Dick. And it's like fair enough. There are a lot of books.
I wouldn't say that I won't ever reread one because I have some favorites, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the way that my library here is divided is the shelf in the middle is everything I've written. On the right are books I haven't read yet, and on the left are books that I have that I don't want to get rid of.
Yeah, of course.
So that's the comfort reads. Here's the to be reads, and there's the ones I've written. So I don't
Okay.
know if I could neglect one to go revisit the other. You know?
Yeah, fair enough. I guess you have to just play one off against the other. That must be very very satisfying to see your shelf just expand. I mean, I've got two on the bookshelf so far, and I'm like, that's me. I did that one and some of that one. But I
Yeah,
imagine that's immensely satisfying.
it is, and I mean, it's a thrill that never gets old to get that box in the mail with copies of your book in it. I mean, from having a collection out, it's it's like a dream come true.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah,
just there's nothing quite like the first time you hold a book that you made in your hand. It's just it's this magical experience that you're like, I'm in culture now. Like I'm part of this greater thing. It's really wild. You actually can't really describe it unless you've felt it. But 100%, yeah.
yeah, and I love that. I love seeing authors on TikTok doing their unboxing of their first book. When it arrives,
Yeah.
that thrills some people. Go, oh my god, wow, this is great. Other people are just awash in tears and they're inconsolable. And you can see that emotion. And I will say that like it never gets old, but it's nothing is like the first time.
Yeah, yeah. It's just
It's just you're an absolute wreck.
yeah, it's
Look
just
what I
crazy.
did.
Look, Mom!
But,
It's like that the thing you put up on the room, yeah. And then of course you have
yeah,
the 20 copies of them that like you just hang around forever.
you keep them because you think that these will be worth millions in a couple of
Yeah,
years time.
oh totally. It's first pressing,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yep.
without a doubt.
Gold dust, and then a couple of years time, like they're moth eaten, they're yellow. It's like shit.
All right, well, if I go camping, I got some firewood.
There you go. Yeah, or something to hold up the leg of the coffee table.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, God knows I need those. I read on Wikipedia as I was doing my assiduous research, that there was a little thing. I think Mark Flanagan picked up the rights to Peepers. That was about 10 years ago. Did anything come of that, or it was in development hell, or?
No, that had an interesting journey. Yeah, Mike Flanagan was on board, and Jeff Howard, the partnership that did Haunting of Hill House and everything.
Mm, great
And
series.
they left the project because the scripts didn't work for the producer at the time. M. Night Shyamalan came on board
Oh, cool.
after that. Yeah. And then Jordan Peele's Us came out, and M. Night Shyamalan decided that the doppelganger thing had been done,
Okay.
and he jumped ship. And then it was going to be a TV series, and I think that was about 2 years ago, and I haven't heard anything since. So it's safe to
Okay.
assume it did. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, and that's what I hear from. Of course, I've never been in that position, but heard that it's just one of these things. Like, look, buddy, the development cycle of this is so out of your control that it's best just to, like obviously if you got to made it into a movie, that'd be great. But
I used to get so excited, like back in the day. I think one of the first short stories that I had published with Cemetery Dance was picked up by Aaron Kruger, who wrote the Ring remake.
yeah,
And I got drunk off my ass and told everyone who would listen I was going to be friggin' famous. That was it. My career was made.
yeah,
Nothing happened, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
So
yeah.
every time I get some movie interest and it comes to nothing, I get a little bit less enthusiastic. So at this point now, I swear to God, Steven Spielberg could call me up and go, "Hey, we want to make a movie of this." And I go, "Okay, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Steve.
Pay me and shut up." That's the way I am now. It's like I'll believe it when I'm sitting in the movie theater eating popcorn. Until then, don't get on my nerves.
Yeah. But you do get a little, they do, like the publishing rights, you do get paid a little something, right?
Yeah, to option it, just to have the permission to shop it around and try and
Yeah.
develop it. They usually pay you between about 1,500 to 2,500, maybe,
That's
just
not
for
bad.
permission. If it goes to a full option, like if they want to renew it, you can have a clause in there that says next time they got to give you 15,000. They want to do it 2 years later and they still won't give you back your rights, 30,000, and it can escalate and they can keep it forever if they want it, as long as they pay you.
Yeah, right. I mean,
And
do
then
they
if the
like you to do
cameras
that?
camera starts rolling on something, then that's when you get the big money.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah. And yeah, it seems like a very fraught process.
It's like lightning.
Yeah. I have another member of this collective has actually she's a film writer, and she's actually had something produced on Netflix, and she really had to drive that process herself. Like she just had to take the ball to the goal, you know, like because it just seems like it's such a fraught process, and such a random, like you said, an act of like lightning.
Well, so many things can go wrong is the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, the process for me has always been a producer will read something of mine, loves it, can see the potential for it to be a movie, buys the rights for it or options it, talks to all these other filmmakers, gets other people on board, gets financing, gets a script, and the script sucks. So they get another script, that's not great either. So they get a third script, that didn't really work, and then they just give up on it. They lose all interest.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and this whole process could be 5 years long.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, any day now it's going to be a movie, and then it isn't. So,
and the author is very rarely allowed to make the script, are they? So it's just totally outsourced, right?
I'd tell you, it's funny because it's usually the first thing people ask me, producers. They say, and would you be interested in writing the script? And for the longest time, I had no experience with that. So I would always say, no, I don't, you know. But as it happens, I'm actually currently writing a script that I was hired to do for a producer. That's nothing based on mine. It's a different thing.
Sure.
But the script for Blanky, I've read that and it's phenomenal. But I had some input on that because they asked. And I think that the best projects come out of people who are willing to be more collaborative. I don't insist upon having anything to do with it, but when I'm asked, I'm delighted to contribute, you know?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, but I mean, there's never any guarantees. No matter how far along on the project, you could have actors cast. You could have the crew there waiting to turn the camera on, and the whole thing could go to shit. It's, you know, it's best not to get the hopes up.
Yeah, totally. Best not to dwell on it too much, I guess. Still, good to know. I guess good to know for budding authors. What about the whole traditional route? Because I don't actually know a lot about this because I haven't done many forays into it. Like, could you maybe give us like a start to publish? Like, where does it sort of start? Where do you sort of come from to start going through that route? The traditionally published sort of route.
I mean, it all kind of comes down to getting an agent. And while a lot of people just send 50 queries out to every agent on the planet, the best thing to do is to find the agent who's publishing writers that you identify with, who are publishing the kind of stuff that you like. If you have to describe your own work by comparing it to somebody else, somebody you look up to, who is that person and who is their agent? And go after that agent.
Okay.
And cite that author that you're influenced by or that you look up to or whatever. And it comes down to how well you can sell yourself, because a lot of new writers have no confidence, and it comes across in their letters like, I don't believe my work, so you probably shouldn't either. And, you know, and the worst is the other side of it, where you're too arrogant and you're like, I am friggin' brilliant, and you are never going to read it another writer's as good as I am. And if you don't publish me, I will hunt you down and kill your dog. You know, you have to be humble, but you also have to be aware of the fact that you are in a unique position to sell what it is that you are good at.
Okay.
To highlight your strengths and your appeal as a writer to the audience that's out there, and the agent is the person who can bridge that gap for you. The first step is making the agent believe in you, because an agent who believes in you will go through hellfire to sell your work.
Right.
And you get that. The agent will guide you along the rest of the process, which is basically going out and having lunches with publishers, or calling them up, or emailing them, or Zoom calling them, trying to create the same level of intrigue in these publishers that you created for your agent.
Okay, cool. So that sounds like a pretty repeatable process then, if you can do it the first time, which is pretty cool, I guess. Just get your elevator pitch. I've had a look into things like, I'm not sure if you're aware of this because you were probably a little bit beyond the process by the time it was a thing, but I've had a look at there's a site called Query Shark where basically authors will send in their queries to a prospective agent, and this agent will sort of go through them and just tear them to shreds. It's actually hilarious, but also very, very instructive, just in terms of like, this is fine, but what is your plot? Like, what are we talking about? You know, like don't start your sentences with this. Like, she'll just absolutely decimate these queries, but it's very, very instructive. So
What it is I think the key thing is you can research the hell out of it on how to approach agents, but I think the thing that works the best is honesty.
sure, yeah.
And I'm not talking even industry appropriate honesty. I'm talking about a level of authenticity where you're basically telling the agent what you know is good about your book and what's good about you as the person who wrote it. Because I've read dissertations on how to approach publishers and agents and all that blah, blah, blah. And I've had 2 agents in my lifetime. My current one is an absolute amazing person. And I ended up with her by looking at the very top of the list of agents, the best possible one, and sending her a letter that outlined what it was that I wanted to do, where I felt I was on the career ladder, where I wanted to be, and what I thought was in the way of me getting there. And I am the thing that was in the way of me getting there. Yeah, and I sent her sour candy at the time, and she called me, and we talked for about an hour and a half, and we had chemistry, and it was, but I wasn't there doing a panicked sales pitch. I was just talking to her as myself. And a lot of people forget to do that, and they show up with whiteboards, they're like, well, this is what I accomplished in 1984. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
Obviously, your credits were important when it comes time to sell it to somebody else, but your agent needs to know who you are, what kind of writer you are, and what kind of person you are. So I mean, I always advocate for sincerity above all else, and people research so hard and so often and so much about the process, it begins to friggin' cloud their minds, and then they sound like a chat bot when they're talking to publishers or agents. And it's like, this is what I am, and I just be yourself.
No, that's wise words. That's very wise words. I know you're a cover designer as well, and as I said, I'm a huge fan of the sour candy cover design, and I really like Kim as well. That's a nice one too. Was that something you did initially? You were just like, I'm just going to make the covers to my own books? Because you're a photographer, aren't you?
Yeah, well, photographer. It's like I know how to hold a camera and point it at things that look pretty. That's it. But back when we were talking about the whole digital revolution, when that first started, I, of course, had a bunch of backlist titles where the rights had come back to me on them. So I thought, well, Jesus, this is just sitting there. I should put these up on Kindle. And then I did some research into how much to pay cover artists, and I was stone broke at the time. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to pay these people what they're worth.
Right. Yeah.
So instead, I did like about a year-long crash course and taught myself Photoshop, the ins and outs of it, and used my own photography at the beginning and put nice titles on it, figured out the right way to do it, and just put them up there. And after a couple of those went up, a bunch of people started asking me, who's your cover designer? Who did them? I said, well, I do. And that started a ball rolling where people started asking me to do theirs. And that was, geez, I don't know when that was, nearly 10 years ago now.
Yeah, right. And that's how Elk Lemon started, huh?
That's right. And I think I've done 600 covers to date.
Did you say 600? Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Yeah, because they are very distinctive designs. I mean, you can see a lot of that classic horror tropes from them, but they do have a certain je ne sais quoi, I guess you'd say. Yeah, they're very, very distinct. I mean, when I saw that, like that, it sounds weird, but that particular shade of red on the sour candy cover, I was like, I gotta read that. I gotta read that fucking. And then the steer's skull as well. It's just.
Well, I'll tell you the thing is, and I create covers for people that I would walk into a store and buy the book
Yeah.
based on the cover without knowing anything about it. And the two biggest deals that I've had movie wise both came about for the same reason. One was Sour Candy because it just passed on somebody's Twitter feed
Yeah.
who worked at Blumhouse and went, "What the hell is this? I must read it."
Mm.
And during the pandemic, a director was browsing Apple Books and came across the cover for Blanky, which is black with, it looks like a chalk drawing of a baby's carriage. Scrolling through Apple Books, saw that and went, "I don't care what this is, I've got to read it." And
Mm.
then we ended up working together after that. And that's what I want everybody to experience. I want to design covers for people that catch the attention of all the right people for them, and increase the profile of those projects by virtue of just how attractive they look from the outside.
Yeah, it's such a powerful technique, the cover design, along with the blurb, which is also hyper underrated.
Yeah.
But I'd argue maybe the cover is the most important thing because just wherever you are, whatever you're doing, however small that pixelation image is, like you're gonna see it, even if it's
Well,
black and white.
it's the worm on the hook, and after that,
Yeah.
then it's the author's job to reel you into the boat.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I actually reached out to you. I think that's our first interaction. I don't know if you recall, but I was like, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm trying to get a grant. Can you like give me a
I
like
do, yeah,
approval?"
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which, but I'll still go for. By the way, the base in the slag heap. I will hit you up about that.
I'm all
But
around.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's just such an important thing just to have that cover there, and have something
Yeah.
that people go, "Oh,
Well, and
cool."
it can't look like everybody else's covers either, because that's not something that's going to appeal to you. You have to be like the bold and bright colors or the distinctive design is the thing that stands out in a shelf of other books. So that's what you want.
And I guess it has to resonate with the tone of your book as well. So if you've got one thing that even if it's like beautifully designed and stuff, and it's just well, there's a man with a silhouette in the background, just like that. And it's like a thriller cover, and you're like, I would never read a book like that. It doesn't really make sense to fit yourself into that mold, I think, and that's definitely something that is encouraged in writer circles, I think.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're not going to have like a beautiful, colorful cover with explosions of paint and it looks all happy, and then you read it and it's about somebody who shits chainsaws for a living. I mean,
that
it's got to
sounds
make
like a
sense.
good book too, actually.
Well, let me write that down.
When's it
Don't
coming
steal
out?
that. Let me
It
see. Hang on.
sounds like a
The
Stephen Graham
man,
Jones book, actually.
the man who shat chainsaws. Okay, there we go.
Just put that in the little thing there. You said that the idea for sour candy was about a year-long gestation process. Do you find that that's fairly common, or are there some that you're just like, oh, just need to jump into it, write it down, or some that just take years, or is it fairly consistent?
It can be different depending on the idea. I remember a story called Visitation Rights that I was literally sitting there watching sports or something on the TV. I wasn't even really watching, but it came start, middle, and end. The entire story hit me right between the eyes. I jumped up, grabbed a piece of paper, wrote the whole thing freehand, and
Oh, that's cool.
it was done.
You couldn't even get to the typewriter, or the
No,
computer.
I just had to write it on pieces of napkins, on the phone
Wow.
book. I was writing it everywhere, but because I was afraid I'd lose it.
Hmm.
And then there are stories like the latest novel that's taken me 7 years.
Hmm.
So, I don't know. Some stories I have to write immediately, and others they have to click in my head completely before I even bother sit down to write them. Like there's a novel I've had knocking around there for about 3 years now, and it's getting close to being ready to sit down and write it, but I won't try until it is.
Hmm. And do you just complete one project at a time? Like you'll have to get through your 7-year novel before you do something else?
I
I
mean,
mean, that's tough. That's tough.
ideally, but I've got a couple of things now that are all coming up to deadlines that have to be tackled at the same time, or juggle them all. I don't like it doing it that way. I like to put all my energy into one thing at a time.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Otherwise, you just feel too scattered. Like I have a problem with. I'm great at just pantsing something out, but in terms of going back and editing it, I really have to make myself sit down and focus. And if I don't, I'll just go and write something else, and that'll be something that gets finished but doesn't get edited. You know, so it's
I love the editing process because that's what you come at your leisure afterwards when all the hardest work is done. You know, the book is
yeah,
there, it's done. If you never touched it, it's a complete novel. But now you get to go in and pick through the bones. You know, it's fun.
yeah. There's something very satisfying about that, like the sculpting away of the little, if
Hmm.
it was a clay sculpture, like just getting a little indent in the nose, and those little Phillips, like they're like, oh yeah, no, then she sees the red shoes over there, that'll tie back, like,
Yep.
it's just
Or there's like a beautiful poetic paragraph that you realize is completely unnecessary and you delete it. And you put one line instead, and it's it's short and sharp, and it works perfectly, and it just makes the whole thing feel better.
cool, man. That was super fun. Um, all right, let's leave it there, I guess. But your most recent, I'm sorry, is it a novel or a novella? Guests.
It's right on the line between the two,
Okay,
just
cool.
to confuse people. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it is, I think, technically a short novel, because it's about 40,000 words, but yeah, guests. It's the most recent one. And people seem to be digging it, which is great because, doesn't matter how long you do this, you can put out a book you're really proud of and have everybody hate it. We're like, well,
Mm.
that was a waste of time.
I mean, it's got another great cover. Like it's actually very reminiscent of The Thing, to be perfectly honest, which I can see you've got there. That John Carpenter classic.
That was completely by design. I'm trying to see if I have the core of the idea is losing your identity to something else.
Mm. Which is
So
functionally the same. Yeah, yeah, that's very
yeah,
similar.
the frozen environment, the colds, not trusting people. So it's
Yeah.
definitely my love letter to the thing.
Oh man, I might have to read it right now. I think that might be my favorite horror movie of all time. So might have to. I might
It
have to.
is my favorite.
There you go. Do you know it's a remake? I didn't realize that. It's a remake of a movie from I think the 50s. Like
I love that one as well. Yeah.
I've never seen that one. I've never seen it.
It's actually great. The monster's kind of cheesy in it, but it's got that same sense of paranoia and sense of place about it.
Hmm.
I really, really dug that one. Yeah, yeah, I love the two of them, and the prequel or prologue, whatever the hell they did in the 2000s, I wasn't such a huge fan of. It
Yeah, there was definitely a period there where horror sort of just took a bit of a nosedive. The whole like brat slasher thing, and it was it's fun for what it is. Like I remember one of them,
yeah,
13 Ghosts, so that actually scared the hell out of me. But looking back at it, I was like, this is actually not as good as I thought it was. And I was like,
it's actually funny you say that because I loved that when it came out, and just like you, I watched it a couple of years back, or tried to.
yeah,
And the freaking spasmodic editing of that thing gave me a headache trying to watch it.
yeah,
Everything's flashing and zipping around, and I went, oh God, no, forget it.
yeah. Great concept, but just a little bit. I don't know, with the sliding glass door thing, and they're like, I guess the agents split, and we're like, you didn't need to do that. Like, it is
That's
funny in a way, but
and that's a remake too, right?
I didn't know that, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What's the
A
original?
lot of
Still,
the original is 13 Ghosts. I think it was in the 60s, maybe.
okay,
The original is not good.
isn't it?
I think if I remember correctly, they were all a bunch of cheesy William Castle movies. The whole Carnival Barker kind of guy who got people into theaters with gimmicks and
Right.
electrified seats and
Okay, had like clowns that
ghosts on
jumped out the
wires
cover.
and shit, which is fun. I love that shit. But yeah, the movies themselves weren't always the Tingler and the Blob. They weren't always fantastic.
Ah, the blob. I do love the blob though. Like the blob
Oh,
is
I love
just.
the remake. I love the remake of the Blob. It's
I actually
fantastic.
haven't seen the remake. I saw the original like a while ago, and it's just they literally are like, and then they froze it and flew it away to space, and everyone was like, it's just like, okay, you can see that the reel
Really?
was like wrapping up. And they're like, okay, we gotta end this.
Yeah, we got to do something. But yeah, the remake is fantastic of that. It's actually scary.
Yeah, I want to watch that actually because I have heard good things about it. That was like from the 90s, right?
Yeah, and it's got some killer special effects in it.
Nice.
That's what I miss about the 80s,
The
and
practical
I think
effects were great in the 80s.
it was how all these special effects guys seem to be in competition to try and one up each other with their movies, and
Yeah.
it resulted in some of the most ingenious creations. Yeah, it was a fun time for movies. That's why we're constantly all trying to write, and the movies are trying to recapture all that stuff now.
Yeah, there's definitely a renaissance. There's definitely a renaissance. There's like a little bit more, I think a little bit more, I don't want to say sentimentality, but maybe a little bit more warmth to the newer era of movies. Like, you've got the Haunting of Hill House stuff, which is, I just love all of Mark Flanagan's work. He's just, yeah,
There
he's
is, but I think there's no shortage of cruelty either. I mean, you have things
true.
like Hereditary, which if you can walk out of that without wanting to just throw yourself in front of a truck, I mean, I do like this era of depression horror that's
Yeah.
just kind of playing on all our anxieties.
Yeah, just that there is something deeply satisfying about that horror that just doesn't give you an out and it's just like, no, no, everyone dies, everything's terrible, or
You're
like
all bollocks. Yep, that's it. Game
yeah.
over.
Like the end of it's actually not a great book, I think, but the end of it is amazing. Revival by Stephen King. Like should have been a novella. Fantastic ending. I don't really like the rest of it. The ending was amazing. I
I would
thought.
actually completely disagree with you there.
Really?
I think everything but the ending was great.
I have heard that. That is the common take. Yeah.
I really thought that was one of his better books in years until I got to the and I won't spoil it for anyone, but that no, didn't work. Didn't work for me.
Yeah. There was definitely a mismatch, that's for sure. Like something just didn't quite hit, but I don't know. I think that was when I was really getting into my Lovecraftian like eldritch horror phase. So I think that just ate that up.
Yeah.
But
And I mean I've always been into that stuff, but I don't
oh, I can
know.
tell from Sour Candy. That's just like pure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was so disappointed with Revival because I dug the story, but I thought by the time it got to the end of it, it just felt kind of ham-fisted, like clunky.
Yeah. Yeah. There
But
was a lot.
he's done that more than once, he can write a 1,000-page novel and the last 20 pages are a giant puddle of suck, and you're like, come on.
I mean,
I mean,
Space Turtles. I don't know, man. I know, I love it. I love it. But and honestly, I'm not as big a poo if that's a word, of Stephen King's endings as a lot of people, but you can tell the man writes as he goes, and that's fine. But
me
yeah.
neither. I mean, and honestly, just most of his books for me are a good time regardless.
Yeah,
Even
that's
if he
true.
flubs the ending a little bit sometimes, the journey was worth it. But yeah, I've always enjoyed his stuff, and I mean, probably wouldn't be writing without his earliest stuff either. So I owe him a debt for that. But yeah. But honestly, these days I have very little tolerance for flubbed endings, which is ironic considering I have a tendency to flub them myself.
Hard. It's hard to stick a landing, man. I
It
struggle
is.
with it. I just always have to rewrite them because I'm like, no, I just like how as you're getting through a book and you get to the midpoint, there's always the like, oh no, what am I doing bit. But I feel like as I write the ending, that just gets worse and worse and worse. I'm just always like, oh god.
Well, for me, it's I work, it's so long the process that when
Yeah,
I can actually see daylight at the end,
yeah,
and it's all this build up, and then 5 pages and it's over, and I'm like, oh, thank God I'm finished. I wrote a book, y'all. Bye.
yeah. It's up, it's ready
You
to
know,
go.
that's it. I don't care if you like it. I need this. I need to be done with this fucking
Yeah,
thing. Take
yeah.
it.
It's not mine anymore. It's yours now. You can keep it. I
You
don't want
fix
to.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's well. You can send it off to your agent and like get the
There you go.
publishing.
Yeah. Yeah. Please fix
That's
this thing. I
cool.
don't want to write it anymore.
That's pretty cool. Oh, nice. All right, I think we should call it there.
All
But
right.
Keelan, this has been fantastic. I've honestly learned so much, like just about the trad stuff. It's amazing. Um,
Well, I would caution you and your viewers and listeners to remember that all advice is just that, and it's based on an individual's experience. Take it with a grain of salt. If you can find any use whatsoever out of it, that's fantastic. If you don't worry about it. Go your own way. It's all good. I am as flawed and fallible as everybody else. So just that's all I'll say.
Well, flawed and fallible with maybe another 20 or 30 years experience, so I'll take that.
Jeez, now I just feel old. Thanks. That's me, actually. That's me in real life. I've just been hired as an actor to pretend I'm not dead.
You've just got an animatronic, like 80s
That's it,
special effects guy just propping you up there,
Yep.
like, and you're just like, oh god.
Mhm.
All right. Cool, man. This has been fantastic. Cool. I will talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
No worries.
Alright guys, that was Kealan Patrick Burke. I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. What a legend. What a hilarious guy. Yeah, just as usual, a little reminder, please review and rate this podcast on Apple and Spotify if you can. Really helps us get discovered and helps other people, listen to us and see what we're about.
You're listening to Prose and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.